This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
What is up, everybody? This is Tyler Harris, and I'm your host of the BreadWinner Podcast. Glad to have you on today, and we have an incredible guest. You guys probably already know him from his podcast that we'll get into here shortly. But, man, we've got Ryan Michler in the house, not literally, but kind of virtually, I guess, and on audio and Skype. And man, so Ryan is... I've been inspired by Ryan's content on his podcast, man. I'm going to tell you right now, you are one of the best conversationalists. I don't know if that's even really a word, but I'm just going to say conversationalist that I've ever heard. Like, the interviews are incredible. They flow. They always kind of come full circle and come back to the themes. And, man, I've been blown away by all the content that you're putting out. But, man, Ryan is a successful entrepreneur, influencer, father of, what, 4, right?
4 kids,
Father
yeah. I've got 4 of them.
And that's a full-time job in itself.
Every time I turn around, it seems like there's more of them, man.
You know what causes that.
I figured it out now. 4 later, I figured it out.
That's right. And so, man, I want to bring Ryan on, and he'll give you a little bit more in-depth on who he is, where he's from, what he's working on right now, and look forward to you guys hearing from Ryan. So, Ryan, man, thank you first and foremost for having me on your podcast. I cannot wait till that gets out, because I really think we talked about some important topics in regards to masculinity and what it means to be a man. And like I said, I'm just incredibly impressed with your ability to have these deep but meaningful and in and out, just timely conversations with people, man. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate that compliment, because I've had to work on that, quite honestly. So the fact that somebody notices that is a good thing, because I'm not the most extroverted person in the world, and sometimes having conversations can be a challenging thing, but I really have tried to work on that. So I really appreciate the compliments. That means a lot to me, man.
Dude, and just to tell you, like, I've had probably 4 or 5 conversations in the last month where I've told other people that. Like, I was talking to Colby the other day, and we were talking about you. I was like, he's just like, the way he asks the questions, the way they always kind of tie in with other questions, and it's a difficult thing what you're doing and what we're doing.
It is
right
a challenge
here. Like,
for sure.
It's
Absolutely.
difficult to ask a question and to really listen and grasp the feedback. But then you've also got the next question on your list, but it may not make sense in the context of where they just took it. So
yeah, it is, man. It is. And you nailed it right there, man. The hardest part is to listen, because I've noticed what a lot of people will do is they'll ask a question and then they'll mentally check out because they've got that next question on a list. I don't even have a list anymore. I've got some bullet points I want to address and talk about, but I don't want to like pigeonhole myself or my guest into one thing. Absolutely. So anyways, I know that's not the subject of today's conversation, but like I said, it means a lot, man. I really appreciate those compliments.
Well, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, anytime anybody gives me the opportunity to say who I am, I always say I'm a husband and father first. Everything I do in my life centers around that. And so a lot of guys will define themselves by the things they do for work or their hobbies and things like that, which are important. Don't get me wrong. But I do those things to support my other purpose in life, which is to be a great husband, be a great father, be a great man in general. And fortunately for me, over the past 3 or 4 years, I've been able to find meaningful work that helps me find congruency between who I want to be as a man and then the way I show up in the world for other people. And you look at a career, that's what you're doing, right? You're serving, you're out there helping other people, you're offering solutions and products to people's problems. And for me, 3 years ago, we created an organization called Order of Man, which is focused on helping other men do the same thing I'm trying to do. And through the podcast and the blog and the movement and the brotherhood and everything that we've got going on, there's a lot of congruency in my life. And man, I got to tell you, I'm the most fulfilled I've ever been, because I get to show up as the same man, regardless of where I am. If I'm at home with my kids, I'm the same as I am behind the mic, and I'm the same as I am when I'm out on a date with my wife, and the same as I am when I'm shooting guns or working out with my buddies. And that congruency has led to some pretty fulfilling and rewarding experiences over the past 3 years.
Man, that's awesome. Congruency is one of my favorite words in the English language. And man, when you've got it, you get it. Like it's
It is.
important.
You're just firing on all cylinders. And what I notice is a lot of guys, they talk about these hats they've got to wear, right? Like, oh, I've got to put on my worker hat, or I've got to put on my father hat. It's like, there's no hats, dude. There's just your life. So if you can find a way to be the same person wherever you are, not only is it much more efficient, it's a much more rewarding way to live.
Well, and less stressful and less taxing. And it's just, I did a post about this the other day, and it got a lot of comments, and I got deep into some arguments with some people in those comments when I talked about, like, be you, not like there's the you at work, the you with your friends, the you at church, the you in front of your mom, the you in front of your kids, the you in front of your wife. Like, there should just be one you. Like, that's you.
Yeah.
And I understand people's reasonings. But there's no excuse. It's you. And you can only fake it for so long. It is.
Well, it's hard because you want to be liked, right? Like,
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
I do. You know, I want to be liked. I want to be validated or approved. And these guys who walk around and say, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I quite honestly don't totally buy into that, because if that were the case, I think their behavior would be a whole lot different.
Yep.
It's a nice gesture, but at the end of the day, I mean, we want to be liked and approved and validated. But I found that the key for me is caring about what some people think. Right?
Yep.
Like, it's not caring about what everybody thinks. It's caring about what the right people think and the types of people who you want to attract and be around in your life.
Man, and it's not.
I don't know how you do that all day, by the way. Like, you've got people videoing you in the cameras. I'm like, man, I'd be so distracted.
I was telling my wife last night. I got home. I'm on the road 4 nights a week, and I got home late last night. My wife was laying in bed, and we were talking, and she said something about just that, about me having someone follow me around with a camera. And I said, it's really not that awkward. You're just at a restaurant ordering food, and all of a sudden someone comes right up here like this. And
Right up
puts
in
the
your
phone
grill.
like right in your face and their face with no like context of, they have no idea. Like, they don't even know this person's with me. They come from the other side of the room right up into the face. And you just kind of have to play it off. And I just kind
Roll
of
with it.
I joke about it now. I'm like, yeah, I can't shake this guy. He's been stalking me for 3 months.
That's that's funny.
But man, like, I'm so excited about this conversation because I am growing more and more. Aware isn't even the word, but like, I'm getting more and more of this feeling of responsibility, the very feeling that you had with conversations I'm having or have had with men. Men do not have relationships, accountability partners, platforms to be honest with one another. One of the most impactful podcasts we've had was with Sean Whalen, and I asked him, what's one thing you quit doing that enabled you to succeed? And he said, lying. And I said, about what? And he said, everything. And like, every time I say that, like, I get chills. I just got chills saying it, because it's so true. Every man walks around, not every man, but the majority of men walk around. Hey man, how are you? Good, great. Yeah, I'm awesome, man. Good, great. How are you? Can't complain. But they're cheating on their wife. Their kids hate them. Their business is failing. They're fat. They're barely got their head above water, but they're putting on this front like everything's okay, and it's not. And they don't have people to talk to. And I think a lot of that's generational. A lot of that is how you were brought up, but it's got to change. Like, it's so crucially important. So that's why I'm so thrilled to talk to you. And man, I'm just so inspired by what you're doing, because that to me is like your whole purpose in life now, is to give people that outlet, give people that ability to go out and have the real conversations so that they can figure out what in the world to do with this life, right?
Yeah, no, and it's a good point. I mean, you talk about this venue and this outlet to have these conversations. I think I see a lot, and maybe it's because I'm in the business, the quote unquote business of helping these guys out. But what I see a lot is I see that people are just having these kind of these vulnerability type conversations for the sake of being vulnerable. And I think that's a mistake too. Sure. Like, there's one end of the spectrum that says, for example, don't share anything. Men are stoic. We always have the front. We do the things that we're supposed to do. And there's that extreme side of things. And then there's this other extreme side that says, be vulnerable and open yourself up and share your feelings. And if it doesn't drive results, what's the point?
Yep.
So either end of those spectrums doesn't drive results. If you're just sitting there bitching and moaning and complaining and whining and being quote unquote vulnerable, but it's not moving the needle in the direction you want to go, that's not productive either, especially for men. I mean, we're bottom line driven, and we should be. You used a perfect word, responsibility. I did a podcast just today, and so many people focus on rights. Like, it's my right to health insurance. It's my right to a good job. It's my right that my wife supports me. It's my right that my employer promotes me. And that's a weak, pathetic way of thinking, quite honestly. It's like the bare minimum. Like, what am I entitled to?
Yep.
Versus the not the extreme, but the elevated idea is responsibility.
Yep.
Like, what are my responsibilities as a man? What's my responsibility to my employer? What's my responsibility to my wife and kids? What's my responsibility as a man showing up in the community? When you start living life to the elevated idea of responsibility versus the minimal idea of rights, man, it's so powerful when you start looking at it like that, and it's results driven. So yeah, we don't need to always be stoic, but frankly, sometimes we need to be, because we got to put our head down and there's work to be doing. And then it's not always vulnerable, because sometimes crying about it or being upset about it isn't, again, moving the needle. So it's finding that medium that actually produces results.
You're exactly right, man. And when you talk about responsibility, that's one of the biggest things I focus on is personal responsibility. The lack of it is a cancer in society,
100%.
Absolute cancer. And the old cliche analogy of you're on an airplane and the
mask,
mask falls. Like, until you take personal responsibility, until you figure your own stuff out and get your own stuff figured out financially, spiritually, emotionally, every area, then and not until then can you look up and just take a deep breath and look to your left and right and see who else you can help. And obviously the first are your family. And then once you get that taken care of, then you can look up and who else can I take care of? Coworkers, other family members, church, community. And then literally there is no end after that. But it can't, none of that can even be discussed until you've taken responsibility for your own life. And man, it's so important. And the lack of it is just freaking rampant right now.
I mean, I hear guys that'll talk about, they'll say things, and maybe they don't say it or vocalize it, but they're definitely thinking it, is like, why don't people take me seriously? And from my perspective, I look around and I don't see everybody's like this, but there is a large percentage of men and women on the planet who are asking themselves that question. And yet when you look at their life, they don't even take themselves seriously. Right. So what's the very first precedent that most people set in the morning? Well, the very first precedent is hit snooze on my alarm.
Yep. That's
the very first thing people do in the morning. And you're telling me that you want people to take you seriously, yet you can't get your butt out of bed when that little alarm goes off? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that you do in the morning? And then it just perpetuates throughout the entire day, and we're shifting blame, and we're shifting responsibility, and we're making excuses, and we're telling the reason we're not performing is it's other people's fault, and it's the economy, and it's my boss, and it's my wife, or it's my husband. And then you have the audacity to ask yourself why people don't take you seriously, or why you're not performing, why you aren't losing weight, why you aren't gaining strength, why your bank account isn't growing, why your debt's growing. It's not really a surprise when you don't set the precedence of taking yourself seriously first, which is the point that you're making.
Absolutely. Man, tell me, when was that moment where it clicked and you said, God, this is what I was put on this earth to do. Like, from this point forward, my mission is order of man and all that you were doing around that. Like, what was that point? What was going on in that time?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, and I won't get all the way into the depth and the backstory of this, but my wife went through a separation with me, and it was a really dark time. Anybody who's been through a separation or a divorce knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it's a dark time. It really is. And for a long time during that separation between her and I was blaming her. Like, how could she do this? Why wasn't she loyal? Didn't she appreciate what I was doing for the family? And it was all her fault. And I don't know why necessarily this shifted for me. Maybe it was just because it wasn't working. It wasn't producing the result, which is to win her back into my life.
Yeah.
So I started thinking a little bit differently, and I started thinking about, maybe I've got a small part to play in this. Like maybe there's some things that I dropped the ball on, or I was the one being disloyal and I wasn't doing the things that a good man does for his wife and his kids. And that was the moment that clicked, where I actually thought our marriage was over. And so I really stopped focusing on her actually because I thought it was over. I'm like, well, this is done.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I started to work on myself. So I started working out. I found some good guys who were succeeding in their businesses with their fitness goals, their mentality, like everything was going good. I reached out to these guys. I connected with these guys. And what was really fascinating is as I began to work on myself, she responded to that. And long story short, we've been married for 14 years this year. You mentioned earlier, we've got 4 kids. So like things are good. They're not always great, but things are good. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I started talking with guys about what I went through, like that separation and how it was. And everybody that I talked to was like, oh man, I've been there. Yeah, I went through a separation, or I've been through a divorce. And it just resonated. Yeah. And that's what really clicked with me is like, man, these guys are really experiencing this. So about 3 years ago, I was like, why don't I just start a podcast? Because I had a financial planning podcast I was doing. I'm like, why don't I just shift gears from the financial planning podcast over to this? And I'll have conversations with the best men on the planet that I can find. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that guys need to hear about. And it wasn't really a vision of like starting this business and this movement of millions of men. It wasn't any of that. It was just, hey, this would be kind of good for me and some guys I know. And from the minute I started, man, it just took off. It exploded, which was a testament to the fact that it's much needed in society.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that story. And it's almost eerie, like your story and my story. I mean, I went through a similar situation, and I had my ex-wife, she had an affair, and I went through a long period of depression, and it was a long separation that finally culminated in a divorce. And man, for the next 2.5 years, you know what I did? I freaking played the victim. Mm-hmm. I played the victim for 2.5 years that I'll never be able to get back. And I was completely content with, oh, listen to what happened to me. I got terminated from this job, and it was a crazy situation. Wife had an affair, and oh man, just feel sorry for me. And I'm just going to hang out and just use this as an excuse to be lazy for a little while, and just 100% was okay with that. And then finally one day I just had this realization that, man, it's all my fault. And I talk about this concept of it being all your fault and taking ownership. And a lot of times when I discuss it, especially with other men, in regards to my past relationship, they get real like uncomfortable. They're like, oh dude, no, that was not your fault. And I'm like, yeah, it was. If I had been the absolute best husband on the planet, if I had created the most incredible environment in our home, would the affair still happen? Maybe, but probably not. And was I a terrible husband? No. But was I the best? No. And so moving forward from that, I mean, I am now the husband that I am because I went through that. And these things that happen for you, not to you, is one of my favorite lines. Like, I am so grateful for that divorce and that situation and how everything played out, even though it was an incredibly painful few years. But it made me the husband, the father, the man that I am today, and really unlocked in my brain that concept of taking ownership for all the other crap that I was blaming on other people. And man, it's exactly what you said is so true, man. It's so important for people to be able to own it. And the encouragement of that is if it's your fault, then you can fix it.
Right.
Like you got
yourself.
Yeah,
that's the
there,
thing people do. Out. That's so true. And that's what people do is what they'll do is they'll blame their boss because the boss is playing politics, or their wife, or any excuse they can come up with. And they think that that's empowering because if it's somebody else's fault, then, exactly. It can't be possibly on me. But it's actually I don't know if disempowering is a word, but it's not empowering. All right. Yeah. It's the opposite of empowering, because what you are actually doing when I say, if you and I are business partners, for example, and the business collapses or whatever, and I say, it's all Tyler's fault. Tyler did this. He didn't do this, blah, 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 blah. What I'm doing is I'm taking all of the power that I possess as a human being, and I'm voluntarily giving it to you and saying, it's your fault, so you fix it, and I'll just sit here and wait for you to do something. Hopefully you will, but hope isn't really all that great of a strategy. Yeah. So I'd rather say, maybe Tyler had a part to play in this, but ultimately there's only one person I can control, me. So why don't I just take responsibility for everything that I possibly can and give myself ultimate and absolute ownership to be able to move this forward? The problem with that is that people are intimidated and afraid of power. They truly are. They're afraid of even their own power because it means that they will need to exert themselves and they feel worried about their own inadequacies. I understand what it is, but I'd rather try and fail than sit back and be afraid to not try at all.
Man, you're exactly right. It's interesting that you just said that the power of themselves. That's interesting. Man, tell me, so on your podcast, I know you asked every guest for their definition of what a man is. I'd love to hear your definition, but here's kind of the way I'd like to frame it. 156 episodes ago, what was your definition of a man then? And then now, has that changed?
It actually really hasn't changed all that much. I think I've done a better job articulating exactly what it is and narrowing it down. Because I think if you were to ask any person out there what a man is, I think generally speaking, most people would have a pretty loose idea of what it is. And they would probably be able to tell you, oh, my dad was a man.
Yep.
Or my grandpa, yeah, he was a man. Or my platoon sergeant, yeah, that guy was a man. So they can point to who men are, and yet they can't really define it. And that's kind of where I was. I was trying to figure this thing out, and I still am. I'm still on this journey myself. But when I look at what a man is, we talked about personal responsibility and accountability. That's first and foremost. If I look at my sons, so I've got 3 boys and a little girl. If I look at my boys, they're boys. They're boys because they don't take accountability and responsibility for their actions. You know, they've got some chores around the house, and my oldest has to work on his piano and do those do the dishes, those types of things, right? But ultimately, the burden of responsibility falls upon my shoulders as the man of the house. So they're not expected to be boys. When a male learns to take responsibility for himself and accountability over his own life, that's when he turns into a man. It's the reason why we have 30, 35, 40-year-old males living in their parents' basement that aren't acting like men. They're behaving like my 10-year-old son.
Yep.
So it's not really an age thing. It's a maturity level. Now, outside of that, responsibility and accountability is, I believe there's 3 responsibilities primarily that all men need to adhere to, and it's our job. It's our responsibility to do these things. And those 3 things are protect, provide, and preside. So when you look at protection, it's about being equipped and able to protect yourself, defend your home, protect your family, protect those who cannot protect themselves. When you look at provide, yes, financial provision, but also mental, spiritual, emotional well-being for your family and those you care about. And preside is synonymous with leadership. So it's to lead. Every man is a leader, whether he's leading himself solely or leading his family. Maybe there's a project of work or something in the community, but we are uniquely designed to step into those 3 roles. Now, some people will fight me and say, well, women can do that too. And they absolutely can. Yep. I know plenty of women who can do all 3, probably better than a lot of guys out there. But in all reality, the way that we are hardwired, the way we are biologically programmed to operate is to do those 3 things, is to step into those 3 callings. And any man who isn't doing those 3 things knows it for himself and feels less about himself because he's not doing what he knows he's born to do and what he's capable of doing. That's the reason we see so much depression in men, because they're not doing those 3 things. They're letting society do everything else. They're relying upon everybody and everything else to take care of their, again, rights and entitlements. And deep down in their soul, they know they're not doing the work of men. And so they're depressed and they're down. They're angry. They're bitter. They're resentful. If they just stepped into that calling, I believe that would alleviate a ton of the depression that we see in men today.
In that inability to do so, it's like they're choosing not to go all in.
Yes.
And so when you never ever truly go all in, you can never be all off, for better words. So we talk about this concept of being on and off, on and off, on and off, but it's really not off. Like you're on at work, you got to be on at home.
Right.
But there are times where you have to be able to turn it off. The reason why I believe most people just are stuck in the middle is because they don't get the first one right. They don't get the, like you talk about, being able to provide. They don't. When your brain is focused on what you haven't done that week to provide, how can you really be fully present at home that weekend with your wife and with your kids when you're worried about playing catch up next week because you slacked off last week? So it creates a scenario where can't be all on, cannot be all off, and you just get stuck in the middle, and that is the worst place to be.
Well, I remember times in my life in the not too distant past where I was literally walking paces around in my backyard because I didn't know how I was going to make the mortgage payment. And I didn't know how I was going to make the mortgage payment because I wasn't doing the work at work in order to provide the type of income that I needed to support me and my family.
Yep.
And anytime there's a disconnect between the way that we view ourselves. So if you have this vision of yourself, like I'm a man, I'm a provider, these are the things I believe a man does. I recognize this because I've seen my dad do it or my grandfather or people in my life. So this is my vision. And on the other hand, you have where you are. That represents this disconnect. And the greater and wider that disconnect, the shittier you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
And the only way to bridge that gap between the vision you have for yourself and where you currently are is to put forth some effort in order to bridge the gap. Like nobody's ever down. Like have you ever met an individual who's down on himself while he's at the gym working out or down on himself when he's like in the work and making calls and hustling and doing all the things? No, people are never depressed when they're doing meaningful work because what they're doing is they're bridging the gap between their future vision and their current reality. That's the happiest place, most fulfilling place anybody can be.
And it's difficult.
Of course it
like
is.
that's the thing. Like I'm thinking I'm thinking of you walking around your backyard and how do I pay my mortgage? It's way more difficult to have that internal conversation knowing you're trying your best versus the guy that's slacking off, not doing really anything. And he's like, I can't figure out how to pay the mortgage this month, but it must
be somebody else's fault.
Yeah, like if I tried, of course I could, but like when you are trying and going all in and to still be chipping away and you haven't broken through that ceiling yet, it's difficult, but everything significant is difficult. Like that's just
and the other side is like just stop thinking about it so much. Yeah. I think for example, walking around in the backyard pacing, thinking about how I'm going to pay the mortgage. Why didn't I at that time just pick up the phone and make 10 prospecting calls?
Yeah. Yeah.
like what if I just did that instead, and picked up one sale? I would have made the mortgage and I'm like, good, done.
Yeah.
But we sit and we dwell and we wallow in our own self-pity about these things.
And there's another thing too, man. You said there, you talked about that vision that you have of who you should be or where you could be and then where you are. I find this happening so often with people, and it happened in my own life. Sometimes it's milestone ages. Like when I turned 30, I had just had this idea of where I would be financially and with relationships and everything. And I wasn't near where I thought I would be. And I've had conversations with those that have hit 50 and have hit 60 and are going through that. And man, my biggest encouragement to them is not to rush, not to feel like they have to play catch up. Because what happens is when you feel like you're behind and you feel like you got to somehow make up for this lost time, you take on opportunities that you maybe shouldn't. You take on you take a little bit more risk than you probably should, and it never ends well. And it's this funny thing about patience. They always talk about, if you pray for patience, God's going to give you the opportunity to be patient. He's not going to give you patience.
Right. You got to earn it, man.
Yeah. But the other interesting thing about patience is I found that the people that are the most patient, or the times where I have felt and been the most patient, things have happened the quickest. It's like just the act of being in that centered place of like knowing that, hey, this is a long-term game. There's plenty of time. Almost creates this. I think people can sense desperation.
Yeah.
Especially in sales. And that's what a lot of we talk about. Like people can sense when they know like your family's like livelihood is based on them saying yes across the table from you. Like, but it affects so much more than that in ways that we don't realize. And it's so critically important, man. So I'm glad you brought that up.
You're talking about faith, really. A lot of people think faith is just a belief that it'll work. No, it's not. That's part of it. But the other part of it is you got to work it. like if you don't really believe that it'll work, then you won't work and nothing will work. So yeah, faith is not only a belief, but it's the action to support the belief. Otherwise, without both of those, nothing's ever going to happen. But it's really funny. I get questions from guys. The question that I really just don't like from when I get from people is like, hey, I'm turning 30 years old. Like, what's one thing I should know now that I'm 30 and not in my 20s? I'm like, dude, there's no difference between 29 and 364 days and 30 years old.
Yep.
Like, stop thinking that there's some like magical formula or some magical thing that you're supposed, like at 31, you learn this lesson, and at 32, then you graduate to this lesson. Look, you're out of grade school. Like, there's no rule book that says, only in your 30s can you learn this lesson. And in your 20s, this is what you do. And in your 50s, this is what you do. Make your life, make it work for you, and learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can. So you don't have to wait until you're 60 to figure this whole thing out.
Absolutely. I love how you mentioned faith. And I love that saying that the opposite of faith isn't belief, it's sight. Like the opposite of faith is sight. And it's believing in a vision that you cannot see. And so it's having that vision, like I'm envisioning with Order of Man, like having this idea of what this could turn into and putting in the work as though it's already happened, even though you can't even see it. Like, it's not tangible, it can't be seen, but your actions every day are proving what is to come before you ever see it. Man, it's such a huge, like you talked about hope not being a good strategy, but true faith, like true faith is so much of a deeper level of just, it's an understanding that when things happen, like of course that happened.
Right. And that sucks. And what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when the good things though, like when the good things happen, like, of course this connection was made and this deal was landed because the work has gone in.
Right.
Like there has been work that has gone in.
That's what you hear people talk about luck all the time, right? Oh, you're lucky. Oh, I can't believe you got that guy on your podcast, or oh, you got this whatever publicity. It's like, yeah, but that wasn't luck. I mean, that was years and years and years of effort and struggle and heartache and obstacles that you overcome and you grind through, and those things start to present themselves, and you put yourself in more of the opportunities to get more quote unquote lucky.
Absolutely. Hey, tell me, so of all the guests that you've had, and I'm not saying,
oh man, I know where we're going,
but not the best. just name one though that made a significant impact. One that, like, when you got out of that interview, it changed maybe something, the way you looked at things, or changed how you reacted to certain situations. Just one that had a big impact on you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, like you said, so many great guests. Jocko Willink, obviously huge. I've talked with him a couple of times. I always walk away with a new perspective of like, quit BSing yourself.
Gotten out on the mat with him yet?
No, not yet. He invited me to go do that, and so and I reached out to him last week. So we'll see when we can figure something out. But I fully anticipate on getting my butt kicked, which will probably be like the funnest, most painful experience that I've ever endured. Definitely. He was good. John Eldridge, he's the author of a book called Wild at Heart. Man, just that's to me, I think he really kickstarted and launched this whole movement to help men step more fully into what it means to be a man. And then I just had another podcast, depending on when this conversation of ours goes live, with a Navy SEAL. He's not only a Navy SEAL, but he's also Ranger qualified. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's starred in Act of Valor, the movie Act of Valor. Just an incredible guy. And that podcast should be coming out in 2 weeks. And he's one of those guys, when you talk with him, you just like instantaneously just connect, and there's something there. Yeah. And that conversation was so powerful.
Man, we've got a guy kind of very similar background that's done some speaking and some coaching at events with our company, a guy by the name of Tom Shea. Are you familiar with Tom Shea?
Oh, yeah. I know of Tom, but I don't know him personally.
You've interviewed a lot of people with that type of high level military special ops background. Do you find it, or do you have a military background yourself? I thought you might.
Yeah. I spent 8 years in the National Guard, and I actually did an active duty combat tour in Iraq in 2005, 2006.
Okay, awesome, man. I appreciate that too.
Yeah, that's my honor.
I have a long family history in military, and that's such a huge, important thing with what we do within our business. But man, like when these people talk and they tell these stories, the average person, and I'll say me, I have a hard time just grasping the reality of the words that are coming out of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tom's told these stories of, getting blown 8 feet across the room and laying on the floor and everything being in slow motion and having to tell himself, like, get up, get up. And how there was only one word. It was just the F word. He just kept yelling over and over and over. It's just the only word that could audibly come out of his mouth, and then taking that first step and then climbing over bodies to find his people, and like just the most insane, chaotic situations. It's like a movie, right? Like you can't even, it's hard to really grasp the reality, but it's incredible those that when they have gotten out, like you just mentioned, that have gone on to careers in coaching and self-development and helping other people. Like it's their ability to take the lessons learned there and apply them to the everyday life.
Yeah.
It just, Tom spoke at one of our events, man, and he said, he gave this unbelievable story of one of the issues that happened in combat. And then his very next question to us was like, so, hey, tell me about a time when you were really stressed. And I'm like,
nothing's gonna
never
compare to that.
I'm like, never. How about that? Like, nothing, nah, not even close. Because
I don't want to discount like what those guys experience. I certainly don't, and I'm not really one to speak because I never had a close call or an experience like that in my military service. But I also think we have a tendency to discount human resilience and resolve, and I think human beings in general are so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. That's why we see these heroes, and they are heroes. That's why we see them go into these situations and do some incredible. I had a guy by the name of Dakota Meyer. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. He rescued dozens and dozens of people in a situation that was horrific. These are like everyday average guys. Yeah, they've got some additional training and they are elite from that perspective. But when you talk to them, they're down to earth. They put their pants on the same way we do. They hang out. They do the same things. They make the same mistakes. And I think it's a testament to the fact that if we don't believe we can do stuff like that, it's because we haven't tested ourselves. Like we haven't put ourselves in enough difficult situations that we recognize, holy shit, I'm capable of more than I've ever given myself credit for. So again, it's not to discount what these guys do. It's heroic. It's brave. It's manly. It's virtuous. But I think a lot of us are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. So tell me, with all that you're doing now and the lives that you're impacting, because I know it's so many, and I know you're probably receiving an incredible amount of emails and Facebook messages and DMs on Instagram on people that were impacted from the content and the message that you're delivering.
Yeah.
One of the best things, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at Meltdown in the desert.
It's going to be awesome, man. You're coming to my hometown, my backyard.
Man, that's awesome. I can't wait. That event, I was telling Colby, man, like I've never seen an event where when I ask somebody, so how was it? It's just this big smile pops up, and it's just like they get all like gushy and like, I don't know. It's like they like melt. Like
Ever's a good friend of mine, man. He puts together some great events and does some good things.
Yeah. So in the recap video of the Meltdown in the Desert from last year, I loved that clip that it was you on stage and you were talking about like the fact that people need to hear your story. Like they're waiting for it. Like someone is waiting to hear the message that you have to give.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think for me, kind of stepping into this over the last year and putting myself out there and having that realization, I want to empower other people. And I know you want to empower other people to get beyond that who am I complex, right? Like,
sure.
Who am I to get on a podcast and have a conversation with someone? Like, who am I?
Yeah, definitely.
But that everybody's got stuff, things that they've been through, struggles, failures, successes that someone, like you said, is waiting to hear because it'll resonate with them coming from you that wouldn't from me, that wouldn't from Tony Robbins, that wouldn't from Gary Vaynerchuk, that wouldn't from anyone. It's from you in the context in your situation that it gave them the breakthrough. And so talk about that a little bit, and kind of like as you started putting yourself out there, did you have that why, or how am I? Who am I to
sure.
get out there, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, just to go back with, and I want to reiterate with like Colby is like, I mean, he's done a good job. That's why people like that event so much.
Yeah.
I mean, is because he's led that event from that position of, I'm just going to share my story, right? And he's so good at that, at doing that. He's so good at recognizing who else is good at that. Yeah. And so I've never positioned myself as an expert, as a guru. You know, when I started Order of Man, it was never like, hey, I've got this all figured out. Follow me. I'll lead you to the promised land, right? It was, hey, guys, I don't have all this figured out. I want to figure it out, and I want to go on this journey.
It's called
Let's
the Order
go together.
Of Man. I'm number 1, and here's
that's
number
right.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
That's right. I didn't. But you look at it, I mean, I didn't call it Order of Ryan, right?
yeah.
Like, it's Order of Man. It's a society. It's a brotherhood. It's a fraternity of guys who are banding together. And so I never positioned myself, and that's the beauty of the environment in which we live right now, and the culture that we have, is you don't need to be the guru in order for people to listen to you.
Yep.
You just need to be real. Yep. Because so many people are sick of hearing these like regurgitated stories that the gurus and the experts think people want to hear. Yeah. And it just doesn't land. It doesn't resonate. But what resonates is, man, I've been through the shitstorm, and I've managed to get myself out of it. And in times I walk back into it, but here's what I do, and here's how I handle it. What do you do? I'd love to hear how do you do it? Yep. And so now we go into this thing collectively, as opposed to I'm the leader, you follow me. No, let's go in shoulder to shoulder. We'll go together, and people resonate with that. And then in addition to that, it takes the burden and the weight off of your shoulders of like, I have to have everything figured out. No, I don't. I just have to be real with people. Yeah. Where am I succeeding? Where am I failing? Where am I struggling? And the more we share everything, not just the victories, the better off it's going to be. And that's what Meltdown's all about, man. Yeah. You know, it's about being real. It's about being genuine. It's about sharing the struggles and doing it together. And that's why Colby's put together, like I said, such a great event. I'm looking forward to going down there.
Dude, you're exactly right about it's being real. And you talked earlier in the podcast about, for some people, to be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable because Lewis Howes told you to be vulnerable, but that's not you. That's not you. Like, it's not going to come out. It's not going to come across right.
Vulnerability is not, same thing with strength. Vulnerability in and of itself is not a virtue. Neither is strength, because you can be strong and do nothing with it. So what good did it do? Nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so funny.
You've got to apply that stuff.
And it's so funny. I've had people there that have asked me in their exact words, "How can I be more authentic?"
Yeah, it's something that can't be gamed.
I'm like,
man.
Holy cow! I don't know where to.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that's the marketing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many people that have come out and say you got to be authentic, and you got to. It's like, you know, I don't know how else to reframe that, because you do want to tell people that that's probably the way you connect with people, but I try to avoid words like that because they're marketized, right? They're weaponized, like. Yep. Be authentic, and here's the 5-step formula to be authentic. And it's exactly right. You know where I'm from. I think people know.
I mean, it's the whole reason that I even put myself out here in the first place, is because I knew that for the vast majority in our society, there's two people they can look for motivation and inspiration and just knowledge in general. There was the multi-millionaire. Mm-hmm. That's not relatable, that lives a different lifestyle, has a different infrastructure built to be able to do the things they're doing at that point. Mm-hmm. And then there's the person faking that they're that.
Yeah.
And it was so far and few between. Like, it was such a gap that I wanted to come on and say, look, here's where I am. I have done some things. I do have a platform to speak from. But as I level up, as I continue to level up, I want to take you with me, but at the very least, I want to still be relatable, because you will have watched me get there.
Yeah,
You've watched the whole process. And man, this week I was laying in bed. I did a 3-day water fast this week. Sunday night to Wednesday night. Jeez. And I was on the second night, and I just couldn't sleep. And I had this incredible clarity. It was weird. It was like I was very, I had all this energy. It was just wired. But I started thinking about all these things, and a lot of them focused around that idea of, okay, I'm now 14 months into putting myself out there and these podcasts and vlogs and people seeing me now in a different light. And it just really, really made me uncomfortable. And so that morning, I would like to say I woke up, but I never went to sleep. And so I just got up, I went and did an hour of cardio, came back into my hotel room and hit live on Facebook. And I had like a 35-minute conversation. And I mean, I got emotional. I was just like, man, I am you. I'm just on the other side of the screen.
That's all. Like, that's
I have
so
struggles.
True.
I have failures, and I'm going to talk about those and continue to talk about those. But like, I just am so grateful for anyone that even click on this podcast to listen to it. Like, it's such a weird thing to grasp. Like,
it is weird, man.
Someone would search something, click on it, and spend 30 minutes listening to it is incredibly humbling.
Oh, it is.
But it's like that responsibility to make sure that person knows that, like, I'm no different than you. Like, my bests are your best. My worsts are probably worse than your worst. Like, it's like, we're just all real people. And like, it was just this feeling of just this weight. So many things going on, like my full-time career and now the 2 podcasts, the vlog and speaking and all these different things and trying to keep all these things spinning. And it was just like, I have a responsibility, and I am not only willing to do it, but like, I was born to be able to do that. But it's not because I'm special.
Right. Right.
It's not because there's anything that God gave me that he didn't give you, that he didn't give Joe Blow. Like, I'm just want to put it out there and show people as we progress and hopefully teach somebody along the way, but really just give somebody, I mean, if it's as simplistic as it's kind of like, it's so easy a caveman could do it. Like, if this guy, if this dude can get on there and talk and become successful, and then, God, I got a chance, at least.
I know I had this guy reach out on Instagram the other day, and he sent me a message. I can't remember the exact message, and I wrote him back and shared something with him. And he wrote me back after that, and he said, "Whoa, man, like, I never expected you to respond." Like, a little bit of like excitement. I woke up this morning and saw you responded, and I was like blown away. I'm like, dude, like, you don't have to be blown away by that. Like, if only you knew. For example, right now I'm sitting in my basement downstairs in my guest bedroom, which is where my office is.
Yep.
I'm on a $70 mic. I've got this little thing that's $15, and I've got some free software on my computer.
Yep.
And outside of that, I've got my gun safe. I've got a spare bed right here. I've got some stuff and some books. It's like, this isn't some professional podcast studio that you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on. And like, the barrier to entry is so low. And if only we could peel back the curtain, that's what I'm trying to do. And you too, is just let people know, just do it. If you have an idea, a thought, a vision, and whatever, the barrier to entry is so low. You build it up more than it is in your mind.
Oh, 100%. And with the daily vlog, like, it's gotten a little bit more produced. But
of course.
It's a 24-hour turnaround. So, I mean, it's as produced as you can produce it in 24 hours, but it looks incredible, and it's cinematic. But this one vlog we were doing, I was doing this recap at night, and I'm in my hotel room because I'm always on the road. And finally I was just like, all right, guys, here's the deal. I'm sitting on an air conditioner. I was like, I'm not wearing shoes.
Yep.
I'm like, using my bare feet. I put these clothes on because I just got back from the gym, and I figured, like, maybe I shouldn't be in gym clothes, but I put this on. But I stink, and now these clothes stink, and I'm kind of pissed about that. But like, and I'm like, this is one take. There's no edit. Like, we don't cut it. We don't say, like, all right, let's try that 5 more times. Like, take 12. Like, it's just because it looks better. Like, I want to make sure people realize, like, that the authenticity, like, it's still, like, it's as raw as it ever been. It just looks a little better.
Right. And you do that. I mean, you should do that over time. It's your quality should get better.
Yeah.
I with the podcast, for example, I started with another microphone. This is my 3rd microphone, and this is the best sounding microphone I've used. Why? Because I built up the business. I've got the revenue to support making other purchases, and we continue to improve ourselves. But it doesn't need to be perfect when you get started. It just needs to get started.
Absolutely. Man, one question I always like to ask, who is one person that you would like to hear on the BreadWinner podcast?
Whew, that's a good question. Who would all of them. I mean, name it. All these guys, Jocko,
Yeah.
Tim Kennedy. I mean, all these guys are incredible guys. Get Elon Musk. That's what I want to hear. I'm fascinated by that guy,
Let's
man.
just make that happen then.
Let's do it.
You just
Between
put it
you
out
and
there.
me-
You just made it happen.
I think between me and you, we could probably pin him down.
We'll do a breadwinner / order of man Elon Musk interview.
There you go. Yeah.
Make it happen.
That guy's fascinating to me, man. He's but you've had some great guests like Andy Frisella, Sean's been on this show.
Yep.
Colby, I think's been on your show. Like
Yep.
you've had some incredible
we
guests.
have, all these circles, man, they get smaller and smaller. So
They do,
funny.
yeah.
Like, I talk to
They do.
somebody and they know and you probably know Dom Facette and a bunch of other people we've had on. It's awesome, man. Hey,
Yeah.
one last real question before we go. One day, years down the road, someone's explaining to your great grandkids who Ryan Michler was. How would they describe you? How would you want them to describe you?
My answer is pretty simplistic on this. Somebody's asked me that before. My answer is very simplistic. I just want me to be described as somebody who does exactly what they say they're going to do and exactly what they've thought about doing. So at the end of the day, it's a man of action. I mean, that's it. Very simply, like he had some beliefs, he had some thoughts, he had some ideas, and every one of those things he acted upon. The end.
That's awesome. I can't think of any other way to close out this podcast, man. Hey, tell everybody where they can find you on social media, websites, things like that.
Yeah, you bet. Order of Man is our headquarters, so orderofman.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all at Order of Man. I actually on Instagram, I do a lot more on my personal account, which is Ryan Michler. My last name is spelled Michler. But between Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and the website orderofman.com and the podcast. I mean, you're listening to a podcast right now, so we've got a podcast as well. You'll be able to find us.
Are we fully stocked right now in books? Every time
Don't
I check
ask,
Amazon.
Man. Don't ask, dude. I'll send you.
That's a good problem.
Yeah, it is a good problem. I'll send. We'll talk offline.
I'm not talking about for me. I'm just talking about for people to be able to go and find it.
Yeah, no, it's there now, and if
Got
it's
it.
not, I think I got a message that has said it'll be there on March 25th. Again, I don't know when this is airing, but
Yeah.
March 25th will be fully stocked. So
Okay. Awesome.
that's been a nightmare, but we're working through it.
Yeah.
It's a good, like you said, good problem to have.
Growing pains, right?
That's right. That's right.
awesome.
Figuring all this stuff out, man.
Well, man, I cannot thank you enough for your time here on the podcast today, and I look forward to connecting with you in person, man. I think you're going to be at the Outlier.
Yeah, so we've got
Podcast
Meltdown
Festival
down
and
in Phoenix, and then we've got the Outlier. Initially, that's what I thought you were talking about, but we've got the Meltdown, then we've got the podcast festival. That's in my hometown. That's here in Southern Utah.
Okay, got it.
I'll be at both, man.
Awesome, man. Well, look forward to seeing you there. And guys, with that, this is the BreadWinner Podcast. I am your host, Tyler Harris, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes. For a chance to be on the show, send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner Podcast.